Two police officers handcuffed her because she looked suspicious. The woman said calmly, "I'm a general." The officers laughed and tightened the handcuffs even more. The problem was, this woman was one of the highest-ranking generals in the U.S. Army, and the smartwatch on her wrist was directly connected to the Pentagon. She secretly pressed the button. When they saw the backup team arriving from the Pentagon, they weren't laughing anymore. The cost of this mistake was 2 careers. Welcome to Stories of Black Lives. Before we dive into these powerful stories that cover themes of respect, justice, and hope, please let us know in the comments which country you're watching us from today. If you want to see more stories like this, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to like our video. She said, "I'm a U.S. Army general." They cuffed her anyway. What happened next ended 2 careers and shook an entire police department. It happened in less than 2 minutes. General Celeste Thornfield had parked her car on the 3rd level of the Riverside Commons garage just off Brookhaven Avenue in Richmond. She had just wrapped up a classified briefing at the Department of Defense Annex building across the street. Rain was still dripping off her hood as she reached into her coat pocket for her keys. She looked tired, focused, still mentally replaying the final moments of that strategy session. Then footsteps, fast, heavy, echoing. "Hands where I can see them." A male voice barked from behind. Celeste turned slowly. 2 uniformed officers were approaching, guns out, flashlights beaming into her face. One tall and red-faced, the other younger with a nervous twitch in his jaw. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle," the younger one shouted. Celeste raised her hands calmly. "Officers, don't move." The taller one snapped. "We got a call about a suspicious individual tampering with cars. You match the description." Celeste blinked. "I'm walking to my own car. My name is General Celeste Thornfield. I just came from back against the wall now." There was no pause, no moment to register what she said. They didn't ask for ID, didn't ask for explanation, just movement. The taller officer rushed in, grabbed her wrist, and twisted it behind her back. Celeste's laptop bag dropped to the ground with a thud. Her military-issue ring scraped against the rough concrete pillar as her other arm was pulled back hard. She winced, but didn't cry out. "Is this really happening?" she asked, not to them, but to herself. She didn't yell, didn't resist, just stood there, face against the cold pillar, listening to the rattle of the cuffs tightening around her wrists. Her ID card, clearly marked with her name, rank, and a Pentagon clearance barcode, slipped from her coat pocket and landed by the officer's boot. He didn't even look down. Celeste took a breath. "Sir, I'm a U.S. Army general. I'm not armed. I'm not resisting. You need to stop and verify who I am." "Save it," the young officer muttered. "People like you think you can talk your way out of anything." That made her pause. "People like her?" She looked over her shoulder straight into his eyes. "What exactly do you mean by that?" He didn't answer. The taller officer took her bag and began opening it. "What's this?" "Some kind of encrypted device. It's my secured military laptop. Serial tagged. Check the barcode inside the flap." But they didn't. They kept going, prodding, searching, acting like they'd already made up their minds. Celeste didn't flinch, didn't panic. But deep inside, something cracked. Not from fear, but from knowing exactly why this was happening. She said nothing for a moment, then calmly, "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a mistake with real consequences." The younger officer scoffed. "Lady, you're not in a position to give warnings." Celeste didn't argue. She turned her wrist slightly, still in cuffs, and tapped a small button on her smartwatch. 1 second, 2. A soft vibration confirmed it. The signal had been sent. A secure real-time alert to the Joint Command Liaison Office in the Pentagon's communications wing. Her location, her ID, everything. The call was silent, but someone was listening now. She turned her head slightly. "You have less than 10 minutes to figure out who I am." The taller officer narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me," I said, she repeated. "You have 10 minutes before this parking garage gets very crowded." But that didn't stop them from digging deeper into her bag, still convinced they were the authority in the room. To understand how wrong they were, you have to know who Celeste Thornfield really is. Not just a name on a badge, not just the words U.S. Army General. You have to go back a little to the dirt roads of Clearwater Falls, South Carolina, a small, mostly forgotten town that her grandfather used to call Black Wall Street without the press. Celeste grew up in a house with creaky floorboards and a fridge covered in honor roll ribbons. Her mom was a nurse. Her dad repaired air conditioners and prayed every night that none of his children would ever have to wear a uniform unless they wanted to. Celeste wanted to. She saw a world full of rules and injustice, and she wanted to understand the rules better than anyone else. ROTC got her out of South Carolina. She went from Charleston State to Fort Stewart. Then from there, her career took off like wildfire. She was fast, strategic, fluent in 2 languages, and never once asked for anyone to go easy on her because she was a black woman in a field where women, especially black women, rarely made it past the middle. By 38, she had led operations across 4 continents. By 45, she was briefing presidents. She'd been deployed, decorated, and tested, but none of that armor stopped people from seeing what they wanted to see, especially today. Earlier that same morning, she had led a closed-door briefing on cyber threat deterrence at the Pentagon's Richmond Annex. She was one of only 3 generals in attendance and the only black person in the room. She wore her full uniform there, but after the session ended, she changed into a hoodie and slacks before heading out. She didn't need attention. She just needed to get to her car and call her driver. But in that garage, with 2 guns in her face and cuffs digging into her wrists, none of it mattered. They didn't see a general. They saw a threat. What's worse, Celeste wasn't even shocked. She had seen this happen too many times before, to neighbors, to strangers, to friends in uniform who didn't look like they belonged. But she never thought she'd be the one, at least not in a garage just blocks from the building where she held security clearance. And still, even in the middle of it, her brain was working, calculating, gathering. How close are we to the dispatch center? Is this Richmond PD or a private contractor? How long until someone responds to the Pentagon alert? What angle are the cameras facing from the ceiling? This wasn't just survival, it was strategy. Celeste knew that panic wouldn't save her, but protocol might. She looked down slightly. Her watch showed a blinking green light. Someone on the other end was watching. Help was coming. But these 2, they were still busy patting themselves on the back, treating her like she was some suspect off the street. "What's a woman like you doing down here anyway?" the tall one asked, smug. "You casing vehicles?" Celeste turned her head slowly, her voice calm. "You should stop talking." "Oh, is that a threat?" he laughed. "No," she said. "It's advice. You're going to regret every word coming out of your mouth." But the one who should have been listening just tightened the cuffs. Sergeant Dorian Blackstone had been on the force for 15 years. He was the kind of cop who didn't like being corrected, especially not by women, and definitely not by anyone who looked like they'd challenge his assumptions. His partner, Officer Jasper Nolan, was newer, still trying to prove himself, nervous, always second-guessing. But neither of them had any business doing what they did that day. They were responding to a vague call from a woman who claimed someone was messing with cars in the garage. No details, no urgency, just a neighbor with a phone and an opinion. When Blackstone and Nolan showed up and saw Celeste standing alone in a hoodie next to a black SUV, they didn't ask questions. They pulled their weapons, made their assumptions, and followed their gut. Celeste didn't fit the image of who they were told belonged in this part of town. "Let's run the plates," Nolan muttered, fumbling with his radio. Blackstone waved him off. "Nah, if she's lying, she'll trip up. They always do." Celeste turned her head slightly. "You know what else always trips people up?" she said. "Body cams." Nolan shifted a little. "Sarge, are our cams rolling?" Blackstone shot him a look. "Of course they are. Standard protocol." Celeste stared straight ahead. "Good. Then the Pentagon won't have to pull surveillance footage alone. Your own department's audio will be part of the report." That made Nolan pause. "Wait, did she just say the Pentagon?" he asked. Blackstone scoffed. "Lady says a lot of things." But even as he laughed it off, his hands slowed. Something in his gut began to stir. That creeping doubt that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have the upper hand this time. Celeste took the silence as her opportunity. "I was the commanding officer on Operation Iron Shield. I've briefed 2 presidents. There are exactly 4 people in this state with access to the information I carry on that laptop, and 2 of them are secretaries of defense." Nolan blinked. Blackstone laughed again, but it was thinner this time. "You think we're supposed to believe that?" Celeste looked at him dead calm. "No, I don't care if you believe it. I care that you touched my property without probable cause, detained me without identifying yourselves, and failed to follow basic procedures for confirming identity. I care that you just assaulted a sitting Army general in a federal facility. Nolan leaned closer to Blackstone. Sarge, maybe we should check her ID again. But Blackstone's pride wouldn't let him back down. Don't get soft on me, he hissed. She's bluffing. Celeste didn't speak again. She didn't need to because across the garage a faint sound echoed. Footsteps, fast, precise boots. 3 men in suits appeared at the far end of the level. Behind them, 2 uniformed military police officers were flanking a dark vehicle with tinted windows. Celeste shifted slightly. Took them long enough, she said under her breath. Nolan turned pale. Blackstone straightened up, but too late. One of the men in suits held up a badge. Special Agent Devin Cross, Department of Defense. Step away from the detainee immediately. Nolan stepped back so fast he nearly tripped over Celeste's bag. Blackstone didn't move. Agent Cross didn't blink now. Celeste exhaled slowly as the cuffs were finally unlocked. Ma'am, Cross said, lowering his voice. Are you injured? She shook her head. Not physically. But Blackstone was still standing there, frozen. He hadn't figured out yet just how badly he'd messed up. Celeste flexed her wrists as the cuffs came off. Her skin was red and raw where the metal had pressed into bone. She didn't wince, didn't complain, just rubbed her fingers together and kept her eyes on Blackstone, who still hadn't moved. Agent Cross turned to the officers. Did she resist? Nolan shook his head quickly. No, sir, she complied. Did she raise her voice, threaten, act aggressively? No, sir. Did she identify herself? Nolan nodded slower this time. Yeah, she said she was a general. Cross stepped closer. And you didn't think to verify that before putting hands on her? Nolan looked down. Blackstone just stared straight ahead like he was trying to figure out how to disappear into the concrete. Celeste finally spoke. It was never about verification. It was about control. Cross turned back to her. We're reviewing garage surveillance, ma'am. Cameras were rolling. The Pentagon's already been notified of the incident via your secure trigger. Celeste nodded. I assumed that's why I sent it. Behind them, 2 military police officers retrieved her laptop bag and phone from the ground. I'd like a chain of custody established for everything they touched, Celeste said. Fingerprints, radio logs, dash cam, timestamps, audio records, all of it. You'll have it, Cross replied. There's already a JAG officer en route. Blackstone finally broke his silence. This is some kind of joke, right? Celeste looked him dead in the eye. You're right. It is a joke. Except the punchline is your career. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Cross gestured toward the far end of the garage. We'll be escorting General Thornfield to the command vehicle now. Officers, remain here until Richmond PD's Internal Affairs Division arrives. Nolan swallowed hard. Wait, we're being investigated? You're being documented, Cross replied flatly. You'll know by morning whether it's turned into something more. Celeste walked past them without another word, head held high. She didn't look back. Inside the unmarked vehicle, a young communications officer handed her a secure phone. Joint Command is on the line, ma'am. Celeste took it and spoke with the same calm she'd held all afternoon. This is General Thornfield. We have a situation. The voice on the other end replied immediately. We know. We've pulled the body cam feeds and reviewed the initial call. The civilian who reported you was misinformed, but what the officers did, that's a different conversation. Celeste didn't nod. She didn't relax. She just said, I want a full debrief logged and routed through legal. I don't want apologies. I want protocol. Understood, General. She hung up, not because she was done, but because she needed a minute to breathe. Outside, the rain had started again. Not heavy, just enough to miss the windshield. Inside the SUV, no one spoke. Celeste glanced at the driver. Take me home. Of course, ma'am. She leaned back against the seat, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself. This country, I've given it everything, and still it doesn't recognize me until I flash a badge. But Celeste knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time Celeste got home to her townhouse in Midtown, the rain had let up, but the air still felt heavy. Not just from the weather, from everything. Her front porch light flickered as she walked up the steps, her uniform coat draped over one arm and her mind racing. Inside, she didn't sit down right away. She poured a glass of water, took off her shoes, and opened the email already waiting on her secure laptop. Preliminary report from the Office of Military Justice. She scanned it in silence, eyes locked in, not even blinking. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. Celeste, the voice said. It was Brigadier General Harrison Vale. He was blunt, ex-Marine, and not the type to waste time. We've already got press inquiries coming in. Someone leaked a tip that 2 local cops detained a high-ranking Army official. They don't know it's you yet, but they will. Celeste stood at her kitchen counter, unmoving. Let them. Vale didn't ask questions. He knew better. You filing formal complaint? Celeste took a breath. No, I'm letting the Pentagon handle it. Vale waited a beat. You sure? I'm not interested in PR damage. I'm interested in consequences. He paused again. Understood. And for the record, we got your back. She hung up without another word. Back at the Richmond precinct, Blackstone and Nolan were sitting in a cramped, overly bright interview room. Neither was in cuffs, but neither was comfortable either. A woman in a gray suit entered, holding a thick file. I'm Captain Rosa Velasco, Internal Affairs. I'm going to make this very easy. Do either of you want to explain why you ignored direct identification from a federal official? Nolan leaned forward. She didn't look like we didn't know who she was. She had a hoodie on. No ID out. Velasco flipped the page in the file. She stated her name and rank, offered identification, and remained compliant at all times. Blackstone clenched his jaw. She was next to a black SUV. That's all we had. You'd have done the same thing. No, Velasco replied without blinking. I wouldn't have because I read reports. I verify identities and I don't slap cuffs on civilians based on my gut. Blackstone leaned back in his chair. You're making this about race. Velasco tilted her head. I'm not, but the video is. He didn't answer. Over the next 24 hours, the Pentagon's legal department issued a formal notification to Richmond PD's chief. The report was airtight, every action documented, every second recorded. Celeste hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't resisted. She'd even warned them calmly, professionally, that what they were doing was unlawful, but they didn't listen. By Wednesday morning, both Blackstone and Nolan were placed on administrative leave. That same afternoon, the chief of police held a press conference stating, "We take the matter seriously and are cooperating fully with federal investigators." Nolan cried in his garage later that night, the weight of it sinking in. He had a wife, a baby, due in November. He hadn't even touched her roughly. He told himself. He just didn't speak up. He followed the lead. Blackstone, though, he stayed defiant. Told his brother it was all overblown. People pull that card when they want to make noise. She's just another angry government type. But no one at the department echoed him this time. Not after watching the footage, not after hearing the audio, and definitely not after reading the statement Celeste released the following day. Only 6 sentences long. It read, I did not ask for special treatment. I asked to be seen. I did not resist. I complied. And still, I was handcuffed, searched, and humiliated for simply existing. This is not just about me. This is about how many people don't get the chance to make a call that changes the outcome. I did. They didn't. But what shook people more than her words was how measured they were. The statement went viral in under 4 hours. Not because it was loud, but because it was precise, calm, controlled, like Celeste herself. News anchors read it out loud on morning shows. Civilians posted videos breaking down the timeline. Other service members, black, brown, and otherwise, shared their own quiet versions of what had almost happened to them. It wasn't just a scandal now. It was a pattern, and the country was watching. Richmond PD was backed into a corner. The footage couldn't be buried. The body cam audio was undeniable. There was no yelling, no resisting, no aggression. Just one black woman, calm and professional, telling 2 armed officers who she was, only to be ignored, restrained, and treated like a suspect in the garage of a federal building. Internal Affairs had already made their recommendation. Sergeant Blackstone should be terminated immediately. Nolan, he was offered the option to resign quietly or face disciplinary review. He chose resignation. Celeste didn't smile when she heard. She didn't clap, didn't toast. She just sat on her back patio with her morning coffee and stared out at the trees, letting the silence speak louder than headlines ever could. Later that week, she received a letter. Hand-delivered. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. General Thornfield, I failed to act. I froze. I followed when I should have questioned. I didn't see you. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I will carry this for the rest of my life. Jasper Nolan. Celeste folded the letter and slid it into a drawer next to old service pins and a photo of her father in uniform. That night, she spoke with a class of young cadets via video call. Her face was calm, her tone firm. I want each of you to remember something, she told them. Your title may carry weight, but your skin still walks in first. People will judge you before you open your mouth. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to decide how you'll respond. One of the cadets, a young woman from Savannah, raised her hand. Ma'am, were you scared? Celeste didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. And yes, but not for myself. I was scared that if I panicked, I'd confirm every lie they already believed about me. That weekend, a civil rights group reached out. They wanted Celeste to speak at an event in Atlanta. She declined. I don't need a microphone, she said. I need better policy, better training, better accountability. When that's on the table, call me. Instead, she wrote a quiet op-ed in The Hill and spoke with 2 state legislators behind the scenes. No press, no photos, just action. Meanwhile, the Richmond PD union released a public statement defending the officers, called it a high-pressure misunderstanding, said no malicious intent was proven. Celeste read it once, closed her laptop, and didn't respond because she didn't need to. Her truth had already echoed far beyond the garage that day. But for some people, it was the silence that hit hardest. The fact that even now, she wasn't shouting, and they still couldn't look away. A few weeks later, Celeste was back at her usual pace. Early morning briefings, afternoon strategy meetings, late-night calls with overseas counterparts. Her wrist still bore the faint outline where the cuffs had been. She didn't cover it. She didn't hide. One evening, just after 9 p.m., she stood alone in the Richmond garage at the exact spot it happened. Same column, same paint scuffs on the concrete, same camera overhead. But this time, no one shouted at her. No one asked her to explain herself. She stared at the spot in silence for a few seconds, then pulled out her phone and snapped a photo. Not for social media, not for evidence, just for her. Because that spot wasn't just where someone disrespected her. It was where she didn't let them define her. Later that night, she wrote a note in her journal. She didn't do that often, but tonight felt different. I did everything right. I followed orders. I earned rank. I served. And still, they didn't see me, but I saw them. And I'll remember. Celeste never filed a civil suit, never gave an exclusive. But policy within Richmond PD changed. New training protocols were introduced. A third-party review board was implemented for all use of force cases. And the woman who called the police that day, she never came forward publicly. But the footage of her call was played in full during training sessions for new recruits. Sometimes the lesson isn't in a headline. It's in the silence that follows. Celeste knew what the world thought power looked like. Sharp suits, loud voices, commanding rooms with presence. But she also knew a deeper kind of power. The kind that doesn't need to prove itself. The kind that moves quietly, speaks carefully, and doesn't let anyone else decide its value. Her lesson wasn't just about race or rank or respect. It was about restraint. Because strength isn't always loud and dignity isn't always visible until someone tries to take it. So now I'll ask you the same thing Celeste asked those cadets. What do you do when no one sees you for who you are? Do you lash out, or do you hold the line knowing the truth will speak louder than anything you say? And for those watching, if you wear a badge, carry a gun, or hold a position of authority, ask yourself, are you listening or are you just looking? Because the next Celeste might not have a smartwatch, might not have clearance, might not have time to call for help. So be better now before your silence costs someone everything.